name's Steve Sloane. I'm a partner at Menlo Ventures. I've been at the firm for about 7 years. The firm has been around for 45 years. We're actually one of the original Silicon Valley venture firms. And I focus mainly on software and application layer investing. So, anything from Carta, which I believe you guys use, things like Heap in the analytics space, Enable, and then more recently been spending a lot of time kind of in and around supply chain logistics and, other types of software and intelligent systems that just help the supply chain run and help business get done. And obviously, Enable's been a great example of that. So, to Andrew's question, just why we decided to lead the Series A, it was actually one of our more unique pitches because Andrew was actually sailing over to the U.S. On the Queen Mary 2 at the time, and he had packed up all of his things, and he was sitting underneath a Wi-Fi router trying to make sure that he had enough service to pitch our partnership. And thankfully he was able to do that. Really at the Series A, I'd say it's about two things for me. It's about people and it's about markets. At the time, it just really felt like B2B commerce and rebate management more specifically was this massive yet underserved market. There were trillions of dollars of payments that were managed in spreadsheets. They were getting lost. And at the same time, it was just so absolutely critical for distributors. In many cases, as you all know, it was more than 100% of their profit. And so this really felt like a market that was ripe for disruption. It was ripe for a modern cloud offering. And so really kind of checked the box on the market there. And then in terms of people, I mean, this just wasn't a market that I think everybody could understand, or, the next engineer would just kind of spin out a Salesforce and create. You really had to understand this market. And it became clear that Andrew and team and David and others just really understood from being a services business, from working with customers, from solving real problems, that this is something they could really tackle. So, myself and the partnership just felt like, hey, we've got a gigantic market opportunity and we have a team and founder who's really motivated to go after it and understands it. And that felt like a magical combination for us to lead the Series A.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steve. That's really a good overview. And how do you think we've done over the past 2 years? Because you see a lot of companies, a lot of very high performing companies, and it'd be great just to get your feedback on that.
We actually have two strategies at Menlo. So, we're north of $1 billion fund. We have an early stage strategy, which originally invested in Enable. And then we have something called the Inflection Fund, which is really early stage growth investing. So focuses at Series B and C, and it's companies that have really strong product market fit. We only invest in about 10 to 20% of the top companies out of our venture fund, out of our second fund. And Enable was one of those exceptions because the company's performance and potential was just so high. So, I think the easiest way to say, how we think you've done over the last 2 years is we've voted with our dollars out of a second Menlo fund. So things have gone really well. And, I think we've been through a global pandemic. We've hired talent. We've put in place a global culture. We've hit actually every quarter that we've ever had. And, kudos to everyone here for doing that during some pretty challenging circumstances. So really, it's been a pleasure and a great journey over the last 2 years. And we're certainly excited to support the firm to a greater extent out of our funds.
Thank you, Steve. That's really great to hear. And David, I think we've got some questions coming in from the team.
Yes, we have. Let's go first to Justin.
Great. Thanks, David. Hi, Steve. We talk about all the time getting the IPO here. I'm just curious, what do you rate our chances and what's your view on the timing for that?
Yeah, so I think on average today, a software IPO is about, has kind of clear line of sight to about 200 million in revenue, and the company's still growing about 30%. So you kind of roughly run the math out. That's probably like a 4 to 5 year time horizon. Certainly could be sooner, and sometimes these things shift around. But if you just look at the average numbers, that would be kind of what you would think. And as a base case, more companies are going to be acquired than get to IPO. At Menlo, we've had 80 IPOs, but over 200 companies go through an M&A process to exit. So it is rare, but the companies that do make it to IPO, they have two things. They have very large markets because they need to be able to grow at a large scale at a high rate, and they have interesting stories. I think people discount that in the public markets, which is, hey, it's numbers are very important, but there's also stories that you can tell investors to get them excited about the future. And so, when I look at those two things, one, on the market size, I certainly think Enable is operating in a large enough market. I mean, even if you were to kind of carve off core competitors, how much is in the ERPs here, how much is underpenetrated, certainly there's hundreds and hundreds of millions and, if not billions of revenue to go after just in your core market. And then, in terms of the story, you guys are clearly the modern cloud leader in this space, and you're taking one of the largest industries on earth, which is B2B commerce writ large, and you're giving distributors and suppliers a better way to work together. And so when I look at the path forward for you guys, I see a very large market and a very compelling story for growth for the next several decades. And so while it's hard to get to an IPO and, certainly not a ton of companies make it, I think you guys, with continued great execution, over the next 4 to 5 years, would certainly have as good a chance as any based on those factors.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for joining us. I'm interested, what do you see as Enable's biggest challenges over the next 2 years?
I think what I'm really excited about for Enable is the transition from your core market and your core product offerings, mostly around rebate management, to expanding to a platform company and some of the bigger visions that the team has, whether that's special pricing agreements, whether it's kind of discrete pieces of functionality that allow distributors and suppliers to work together. The big leap forward for Enable over the next couple of years is really becoming that platform company that starts to tell the story around, hey, here's all the ways in which we enable smarter trading relationships between partners and why we're just absolutely critical for the future of B2B commerce, which is under so much pressure. So I'm just super excited to see those products come out. I'm super excited to see the customer value and, really the broader story of Enable that you guys all have started to articulate come to the forefront.
Hey, Steve. So kind of like operationally, big companies, public companies operate a lot different, right, than where we are in Series B. And what do you see as the key changes we need to make operationally as we move from where we are today to IPO?
Public companies, I would say, are all about predictability. So when you're a public company, you're committing on a number to the street, and you're actually expected to go out and beat that number and then raise for the next quarter. So there's this whole beat and raise game that goes on with the street, and all the analysts are kind of going through your numbers and hoping for a positive surprise. And if companies are not ready for that because they haven't gotten to that kind of clockwork level of machinery, the public markets is not a very forgiving place. And so I would say for an early company, early to mid-stage company, Enable has been phenomenally predictable. I mean, kudos to Nick and, everyone on the finance team, as well as the sales team and everyone working together in operations to make that happen. But, being a public company, it just ratchets that up to the next level. Everything needs to be buttoned up. You need to really understand what's going on, and you need to understand how to communicate that to the investors and the street in a way that there's just no surprises in the business from quarter to quarter, except for positive surprises. So, the name of the game is just building on all the machinery and the predictability that you guys have that is really best in class for a company of your stage.
Pleasure to meet you, Steve. I'm a CSM based out of Toronto, and I feel like this is a very CSM question for you. But what would you consider the most successful investment Menlo has made? And then how do you measure that success?
I think we've been lucky and had some amazingly successful investments over the last, 5 to 10 years, some consumer names like Uber and Roku that we've been early investors in and have been household names. If you look over the history of Menlo, actually, in terms of dollar return and impact, I would say the most successful company we've ever invested in is Gilead Sciences, which is an $80 billion biotech firm. Menlo actually incubated the company. So it was started in Menlo offices. They do about 25 billion in revenue today. And they make revolutionary antiviral drugs. So they treat HIV, hepatitis C. They were actually the first approved drug to treat COVID, which was remdesivir. And so, when I look at Menlo investments, obviously the primary criteria is generally return, right? We're trying to create returns for our LPs, who are generally pension funds, university endowments, sovereign wealth funds, and really kind of create great returns for them. But at the end of the day, we also want to be proud of the impact that our companies have had on society, commerce, and the world. And so certainly looking at a company like Gilead, even though that was decades ago, is I think something we look back at Menlo and think of as our most successful investment.
Awesome. Thank you.